Happy Halloween, my friend.
Happy Halloween. Who are you tonight?
I'm going as a basic cable television host.
Are you really?
Yeah.
And I'm going as a ahead of his time homosexual comic. Being Halloween night, we're doing Bride of Frankenstein, which I think is the superior.
Many people think it's better than the original, though the original is terrific.
It's very good. And these were actually considered kind of horror comedies.
Yeah, a little bit.
I didn't know that.
I wouldn't really call this a horror comedy. I mean, there's some laughs in it, I guess.
We'll get to that later. But but he knew what he was doing, James Whale. And he was an openly gay director at that time.
Right, everybody knew.
Everybody knew, and he didn't care.
And at the point when Hollywood started caring, then he was like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah.
It makes sense that this one is better. I mean, that's 1931. We're basically 2 years, 3 years into sound. They're feeling their way, figuring out what they're capable of. I mean, movies in general were better in 1935 than they were in 1931. And James Whale did not rush into this. In fact, he didn't want to do a sequel. They had to get him to do it. And when he came up with a good enough story, and when he got paid enough, he was willing to do it.
And I think it was a surprise to everyone that it was better than the first one. And I think because it's a sequel, sequels, no matter when they're made, sometimes they're certainly not better than the original.
Right, but this is again like 1935. We're not in that sequel era.
No,
yet, right? Nobody thought, oh, we've got a franchise here.
You're right. They didn't do that, but it's interesting that they did that with a very, very popular horror film. And this picks up right where Frankenstein left.
It does, but they do I think Whale does a very clever thing here, which is they ignore the coda at the end of Frankenstein, where we see that Henry Frankenstein has survived and he got married and everything's fine. And they're like, okay, forget that. We're actually picking up like the same day.
Yeah.
Right? So they just ignore that ending and then pick it up. And I think that was a bold decision. And then, as you'll see, they put this really ingenious little bit at the front of Mary Shelley talking to her husband and Lord Byron about the story. And then she says, oh, there's much more to the story. Would you like to hear it? I thought that's brilliant.
It's a very clever opening. I think it's really smart too. I do. And because that wasn't in the original, and it sets up and it gives you a history of who wrote this thing in the first place.
That's right. And it ties it back to Mary Shelley, even though this Bride of Frankenstein is a totally original idea.
And Elsa Lanchester gets to play Mary Shelley and the Bride.
And the Bride of Frankenstein, which was news to everybody going to see the movie in 1935, as they'd done with the original, which had a question mark after who plays the monster. Here, the Bride has the question mark, so they didn't know.
Yeah.
So before we show the film, let's talk a little bit about the gay themes in it. There's a lot of talk. You can find a lot of really thoughtful stuff written about this, and it starts with James Whale, but also the notion of the monster first as an outsider, right? Not accepted, different, not finding a way in,
misunderstood.
And
then and he actually speaks in this one.
He does.
Starts to speak.
Wood, fire, good. Yeah.
And there's that
tennis
there's that scene with the blind man that is parodied in Young Frankenstein. See, I always think of Young Frankenstein when I see these movies because it's hilarious the way that was done. And he actually takes these scenes, and even in the first Frankenstein where he throws the girl in the water, they parody that too. And it's so smartly done, and I think of that all the time.
No, Mel Brooks, the Young Frankenstein, the parody, which was of Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein, which is the movie we'll have.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that after, too.
But you'll see it in this moment, this really lovely scene, this 4 or 5 minute scene between the monster and the blind hermit. And that seems to me very clearly the idea of a gay relationship that the town can't understand. There's these two outsiders, they've connected, they bond with each other. There's this lovely gentleness that the hermit has with it.
It's very touching, and it's very sweet. And Boris Karloff plays the hell out of this character.
Yeah,
I mean, I know he's in makeup, but you really feel bad for him in both these movies. You just feel really bad for him, and it's tragic because it's not his fault. He was dead and he was brought to life. You think that brain's going to work? I don't think so. It's not good.
All right, let's watch the film. Here it is, from 1935, directed by James Whale. Colin Clive, Boris Karloff, Elsa Lanchester, Bride of Frankenstein. Back with Mario Cantone to discuss Bride of Frankenstein.
Let's discuss.
William Hurlbut and John Balderston, they wrote the screenplay. And again, I just think that opening to bring Mary Shelley and Percy Bysshe Shelley and Lord Byron into it and tie it back to Mary Shelley, and then their willingness to ignore how the very last moments of Frankenstein, because it was the worst part of Frankenstein, and then sort of reimagine it as picking up an hour later. I think it's just so smart.
And that opening with Mary Shelley, it feels very different than what the rest of the film is. And speaking of Dr. Pretorius.
Yes, Ernest Thesiger.
He was a good friend of James Whale's, obviously very gay, playing a very flamboyant role. That's where I think the comedy comes in. Also, he's really funny.
And also his little creatures. His miniatures.
His little,
Yeah. His king constantly coming out of the bottle because he wants to get to the queen. That's true. That's funny.
There's some funny stuff. And I think James Whale, the way he uses comedy in this film, I think he knew what he was doing. He knew where to place it. And he knew it was funny. It wasn't a camp thing. It was funny because he wanted it to be funny.
You mentioned it before the movie, but Elsa Lanchester as Mary Shelley in that beginning scene, and then of course as the bride. She's amazing. She's got no lines, but just the looks and the screams, and then and
it's it's 5 minutes pretty much. She's on screen for like 5-10 minutes, and she's incredible.
Right. She's on scene for 5 minutes total, like 2.5 at the beginning and 2.5 at the end, and
that's it.
But she's so
you remember her,
such an impression,
and it's just an iconic. The hairdo.
Jack Pierce did the makeup for Boris Karloff, also for her. Like, he really designed that look. And think about that look that Jack Pierce designed for the monster and how unbelievably influential that's been, right?
And I think James Whale was very visual.
Oh, yeah.
He
had an idea.
He probably had his fingers in everything, including, not that he did the makeup, but he
there's no
made sure it was right.
Yeah. Did you watch these Universal horror movies as a kid?
I did.
Yeah.
I liked them. I watched a few of them to see which one I wanted. I was going to do 2 James Whales and do The Invisible Man, but I liked The Invisible Man, but I didn't love it. I found it annoying at times with all that voiceover stuff of, watch out, here I am, I'm going to, I'm like, all right.
You sounded like Martin Short doing Jiminy Glick there.
Yeah, I didn't love it. No, and so, the next film that we're going to see was not James Whale, but it was the third of the Frankenstein movies, and one that's unsung.
Yeah, no, this next one is a good one. There's no question.
Yeah.
It's Son of Frankenstein is strong. If you think just because James Whale is no longer attached to the series, and therefore the movie's not worthy, it's a mistake. This is an excellent film, Son
I
of
think so,
Frankenstein.
too. And James Whale, look, he did the second one, and he didn't want to do it, and he was like, not going to do the third. So it got done anyway, because, see, Frankenstein had a lot of sequels.
And the key, as we're about to find out in The Son of Frankenstein, is that we get Bela Lugosi joining the cast and really stealing the movie from Boris Karloff.
Agreed.
Yeah. Mario, good stuff, as always. Well, not as always.
Not as always, but it was good.
Yeah.
It's Frankenstein. It can't be bad. It's the Bride of Frankenstein. Here comes the Bride of Frankenstein. Okay?
Stay with us. Coming up next from 1939, the sequel to Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein. It's next on TCM.